Good afternoon, everybody. We will start shortly in about 4 minutes, but just wanted to welcome our early arrivals to our webinar today. You'll see on the screen a little bit of information just to make sure you make the most of the experience and enjoy being online with us today. So you've got a control panel on your screen. So just familiarise yourself with the GoToWebinar control pane. Check your audio is connected to the right device. So that might be your headphones or your phone or computer speakers. So you just need to select the correct device. You can also ask for assistance via our moderators. Marnie is online today with Chantel. Just enter your question in the question box via the control pane. But we also have on the screen a support number. So if you are having any further difficulties, please feel free to contact that number directly. And as we said at the start, everyone has been placed in listen-only mode for the webinar duration, which means your mic and webcams will remain off. So please use the question box to chat with us. So we will get started in a couple of minutes and I will be back online shortly. So we are going to get started in about a minute's time. Just for those that have joined us already, welcome. I see we've got someone from Denmark online with us, so that's quite exciting. But thank you for everyone across Australia and internationally, it seems, to be joining us today. So we'll get started shortly, but just on your screen is a little bit of information for you to make sure you make the most out of the webinar this afternoon. So you do have the GoToWebinar control pane. There is a questions box there. So we really invite you to share where you're joining us today from and also questions throughout the webinar. We have placed everyone in listen-only mode, and so your mics and webcams have been turned off, but please again use the questions box as we go through, ask questions, please provide comments or any of your reflections throughout the presentation. If you do need assistance, we do have our moderators online, Chantel and Marnie, so they're here to help you and to respond to questions where they can, but we also have a Q&A component of this webinar which will allow for myself and the other presenter to have a conversation and respond to some of your comments and queries. If you do need technical support, again, please use the chat box, but you can also contact us via our technical support line, which is on your screen at the moment. So we have reached 4 o'clock, so we are going to make a start. And as I said, welcome. We're really happy to have everybody online with us today and joining us for our InFocus webinar, Supporting Diverse Online Safety Needs. We're really excited to have so many of you join us today. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. My name's Natalie Fenariotis, and I'm the implementation lead for BU here at Beyond Blue. I work really closely with the teams across our wonderful delivery partners too, Early Childhood Australia and Headspace, and my background is in education and child and youth wellbeing in schools. This is an incredibly important topic to be learning about and discussing today, and I'm really looking forward to introducing today's overview and our subject matter expert shortly. So as we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of lands and waters throughout Australia and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. So I'm joining us online today from Melbourne, Victoria. So I'd also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. As we gather here online today from across our country and internationally, I invite you all to think about which lands you're joining us from and reflect on what that connection means to you. On behalf of the BU team, we recognise the importance of continued connection to culture, country and community, to the health and social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, young people and their families. We continue to embed Aboriginal ways of being, knowing and doing to all our BU practices. Now, whenever we talk about mental health, it's really important that we do look after ourselves and check in with how we're feeling and thinking. As educators, we all come with our own experience, and if there is anything that we cover today that raises any uncomfortable feelings for you, then feel free to opt out for a bit. So again, when talking about mental health, this is really important, and also including online safety, which we're going to be discussing today. We want this to be a really safe and open space for everyone, and our moderators are also here to answer your questions or respond to any comments throughout the session. Self-care is really important and an incredibly important aspect of the work we do within BU. So it's important to prioritise your wellbeing and focus on every dimension of your health when we're looking after ourselves. So you may have seen some of this information already while you're waiting to join the webinar today, but just a few reminders before we get into online safety content. We recognise you already come with a lot of expertise and knowledge today, and we really encourage you to get involved and share this with others. So please, again, use that chat functionality, ask questions, write comments. We'll also be running some polls throughout the session, and also providing feedback to us via a short exit survey really helps us evolve what we're offering you and making sure that it's meeting your needs. We hope to respond to as many questions via the chat as we can, and especially during our dedicated Q&A time towards the end of the session. So please comment and we will respond. Please also note that this session is going to be recorded and available on the BU events page within approximately 2 weeks of today, and you'll also be provided with a certificate of participation for attending today. As I mentioned before, if you do have any difficulties, please chat to our moderators or contact our technical support line. The number is on your screen at the moment. So let's dive into our learning today, supporting students' diverse online safety needs. You can see on the slide that we're going to be unpacking a lot today with the expert support of our guest panellists, who I'll introduce shortly. To set the scene for the webinar, let's reflect for a moment on why we are all gathered today to talk about online safety. For children and young people today, being online, using social media and exploring and using different online applications has become really an integral part of their lives. According to the Bureau of Statistics, our young people are amongst the highest online users, with those within the 15 to 17-year age bracket leading the way. At the moment, we know about 18 hours plus is being spent online every week for personal use. And these figures are from 2016, so they'll be continually increasing as we move along and progress with technology. We know that there are many benefits to being connected to the online world, which we're also going to highlight today. It often gets a bad rap, but we do want to be able to share both sides of that story. But we do know there are many challenges as well, especially for our educators joining us today. I know that you would have either observed some of those challenges in your learning community, had conversations with children, young people, or their parents and carers about some concerns of online usage. And unfortunately, you may have also played a role in responding to an online issue or the aftermath of an online incident that has occurred in your learning community. Fortunately, we have you here today to share that knowledge with you, and we have a fantastic guest panelist joining us. So I am going to introduce Greg to everybody. He is one of the senior trainers at the Office of the eSafety Commission. Greg is one of Australia's leading online safety presenters. He's got a really strong background in leadership and change and has held senior positions, including Regional Manager for the Victorian Industry of Education Partnerships Program and Chair of his Regional Adult Education Board. Greg has been recognised for his achievements and passion for helping others, receiving a Global Achievement Award through the International Society of Technology in Education. So, Greg, I will invite you to turn on your webcam now. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to hand over to you, Greg.
My pleasure, Nat, and thank you very much for the introduction there. It's fantastic to be part of our session today, and I believe you'll come back with us later today in the presentation to unpack some of the areas around the wellbeing and mental health of young people. And certainly the digital age and digital technology has a lot to do in that particular space. But let's start with a little bit about eSafety and give you some background. eSafety was established in 2015 to help Australians have safer experiences online. If you look at the left-hand side of the screen there, you'll note that while we formally started as the Children's eSafety Commissioner, we're now doing lots of work right across the board, certainly working with parents, we're working with women online, we're working with seniors. In fact, those over 55 years of age are the most scammed group in Australia, and we've been providing support for them. But young people today really are connected, and it is very important that we are able to provide support in those particular areas. As a government agency, we were created and we now operate under legislation, which is the Enhancing Online Safety Act of 2015. As you'll see from this slide, there are so many different areas that we work in, and that legislation assists us to try and support Australian citizens to keep safe. We're in fact even starting to work in early years at the moment with a new program for 1 to 5-year-olds and early childhood centres. We have a focus on education and prevention, and all our programs are underpinned by our research, and our research team is continually publishing content on our website. But despite all the education and preventive efforts in the world, not just by us, but all the other agencies, it's inevitable that online abuse still occurs. And unfortunately, while that does happen, we're pleased to know that the eSafety Commissioner can assist when sometimes these issues are occurring. And certainly the area we're going to talk about today is vulnerable young people and the mental health and wellbeing of them. Australians turn to us for help, knowing we can investigate serious online abuse like cyberbullying and image-based abuse, and help with the removal and hold perpetrators to account for their actions in these particular spaces. I want to talk about what might increase a student's vulnerability online, and in today's session we're going to look at some of the diverse needs of young people online, especially, as I said, those who are vulnerable. Many young people have vulnerabilities online and offline, which means they are facing multiple vulnerabilities, both bullying and cyberbullying in many other areas as well. Many of these young people also require additional education around the way they use technology, and particularly around developing support networks for them so that they can have positive experiences in the online space. So as we begin to focus our attention on what might increase a student's vulnerability, we might start with a poll to gauge your understanding of what are the things that are increasing student vulnerability. So if you'd like to think about this for a moment, and if you'd like to tell us, what do you think could increase a young person's vulnerability? Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but there are some factors that perhaps get you thinking about what I'm going to cover in my presentation today. You might consider the students that you teach and work with now, and the influencers and their ability to feel empowered, controlled, and have a voice. So let's see you clicking on the button, and we'll have a look at how our results go. I'm certainly seeing that those young people who are in out-of-home care, the foster care system, certainly issues for them in those particular areas. We're certainly seeing the culturally and linguistically diverse young people struggling sometimes with some of the issues, particularly the fact that they don't often report issues that happen. Living in remote and rural areas often don't have the support in those places. Living with a disability, certainly sometimes technology is a great place to move to, and often your disability is not recognised because you can hide behind the screen, and those in the LGBTIQA area also. I'm looking at our results there, and I can see that living with a disability seems to be the most popular answer in today's poll. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. So vulnerabilities happen across a whole range of children, and certainly when we break this down, we often see this multilateral and intersectional issues that impact on young people. If you look at certainly the personal characteristics, the situational factors that cause issues in there, I think we have to realise that sometimes it could be ethnicity or race, it could be the culture, it could be something like your gender, it could be the sexuality, your age, there could be cognitive, social and emotional issues that are happening, and for many young people, they have a combination of these. When we certainly see the susceptibility to online risk, it can sometimes be shaped by many of these factors, and everyone can experience vulnerability at different times of their lives. This really depends on the interplay of circumstances and life events, and a vulnerability lens alone does not provide a complete picture of the factors that underlie a young person's susceptibility to online risks and harm. It is increasingly apparent that an individual's vulnerability online is a multi-layered, intersectional, and can also be empowered by situational factors, for example, those in out-of-home care, those who are in areas where perhaps the family environment or perhaps low literacy levels. This could include things like domestic violence in the home or being in the foster care system. Central to intersectionality is the recognition of inequalities that are rarely the result of a single factor, but can be shaped by different relationships and experiences. Sometimes these elements can also contribute to social exclusion, and this could be through racism or gender inequality. Many young people have multiple factors to contend with, and that becomes certainly a challenge for us. If we look at the Royal Commission and some of the findings here in the Commission's report on child sexual abuse, there is indicators that children who are vulnerable to online harm are already at risk offline. In those instances, the digital media is just serving to facilitate those issues. When we look at young people who fit these categories, it could be young people who are in foster care, it could be special needs or additional needs children. It could be those living with mental health difficulties. It could be those living with communication difficulties. It could be a physical disability. It could be from the culturally and linguistically diverse community. It could be living in a rural remote area, or they could be part of the LGBTIQA sector. And certainly for them, the issues that they deal with daily can often not be recognised by others. So with these young people being in the digital space, and the digital space also being a very important place for them, we do see the impact of trauma when it happens. We've seen for many of these young people the previous maltreatment and trauma that's happened. Perhaps it's situational, maybe in the home, maybe the community. It could even be society that's causing those issues. We see the loss of connection to family and culture. Perhaps a child who's been relocated through the foster care system, or moving in and out of home of perhaps a homeless person, or maybe someone who's actually got a sporting contract and has moved from an environment perhaps in the northern parts of Australia to the south where the culture is so different. We also see this multiple placement and parade of strangers, both sometimes in foster care where children are dealing with a multitude of family members to support them, but also for many of them coming across the wide number of support services, and the fact that even their counsellors are not regulated in those particular spaces. These young people who suffer from trauma often have a limited knowledge of education about sex, sexuality and respectful relationships. They don't have the family environment that could really assist them to understand what happens in these digital spaces and in the context of their environment. The high risk of online grooming and sexual exploitation is certainly happening for those looking for connection, those in foster care, those with perhaps disabilities who are looking for someone who can relate to them and to share their own experiences. Our research has been very clear that some of these groups are probably targeted in quite different ways. We've often found young people living with a disability perhaps have contact with stranger more often. And if we look at someone perhaps with Asperger's disease, their attraction to gaming and how well they function in there and the fact that they're accepted in there. And for many young people, they may not even be aware that the person they're talking to knows that they have a disability. We look at our CALD community, and certainly young people, they're almost in a situation where they sometimes feel it's very difficult to be able to communicate. What we do know is that they're unlikely to talk about these things, and that could be because perhaps the cultural background they're brought up in, perhaps the country they grew up in, the technology was quite different, or perhaps they don't believe that their parents understand the technology and a struggle with that conversation. Students in care are at higher risk of sexual exploitation and grooming, and again, probably foster care, support services where a young child is trying to get something that becomes a connection in their life. And those living in rural remote areas are far less likely to have professional support. We see less specialised support as we move away from the big cities. The distance of support becomes means that we have to travel, and sometimes the support there is not specialised, as one person may have to fulfil the role of 20, 30 or 40 people. So young people really have diverse needs, and we need to think about how we work in these areas. These young people may be less able to distinguish between reality and fiction. If we look at the gaming world, for many young people, particularly boys who move across to this particular space and often say, I have more friends than I've ever had in my life. I spend more time with my friends, mainly because we're in the gaming world. We also see girls who are using social media with large numbers of friendships. And again, this challenge for them is to understand, is this a real friend or is it not a real friend? They often believe that the casual acquaintances they build online are people that they can trust, and they trust them accordingly. Some of you have heard of the term FOMO, fear of missing out. We look at peer pressure, and we also look at exclusion. And I'm reminded of a 16-year-old girl who said to me, I'm pretty safe online. I don't have too many problems. No one can see my stuff except my 3,655 friends. So I think what you can see in there is that some of these young people really have no concept about what a real friendship and relationship is about. For many of them, they find it hard to manage financial issues, particularly relating to online activities. They don't have a good understanding of things like in-app purchases and how these things can be real money and how they can trick you into spending online. And of course, we actually see them more likely to post inappropriate content without understanding the consequences. They don't often understand about intimate photos, the emotional fallout, and the legal issues that may go with posting an image like this online. But there are certainly plenty of possible impacts that this has on the wellbeing and mental health, and it's been an area that the eSafety Commissioner has begun to focus more on, and certainly the support services we need and the understanding in this area is growing. In fact, we might ask Nat if you'd like to come back for a little while and talk a little bit about the impact of the online usage on the wellbeing and mental health of children and young people.
Thanks so much, Greg, and thank you for unpacking that in this introduction as well. Definitely a lot of thinking on my end too, and reflecting on the students that I've worked with in the past. A lot of what you've brought up really resonates with me. So I'd really encourage, again, everybody, please use the chat box. If there are things that Greg has spoken about that resonate with you, that you can relate to your context, or you have more questions, please check in with our moderators, because we'd love to talk through that through our Q&A session. So it was really interesting as well, Greg, that you unpacked, I guess, that intersect with one another of each of those factors and what we need to be really mindful of when considering students in our learning communities. A couple of things, again, that you had said, some young people don't report as well when things are going wrong, and so, you know, they're missing out on the support and care that their educators can provide to them. And also looking at, you know, those risks that occur offline can be exacerbated or, I guess, reflected in the online world too. So what I wanted to highlight now, which Greg has touched on a couple of these points, so hopefully this can affirm what Greg's been saying, but just to get you to think a little bit further about the mental health impacts, what young people, when they're engaged in that online world, how that impacts their well-being, their mental health, and especially those who are more vulnerable. The presence of digital technologies in the lives of children and young people is not a new phenomenon. However, educators, parents and policymakers are questioning the effect that technology can have on the mental health and well-being, and now more than ever. It is important that as we talk through this, we do remember that digital platforms are an extension of the offline worlds in which children and young people play, where they learn and where they connect with others. Our students may be digital natives, but we do have some catching up to do in this space to understand both the benefits but also the potential risks and how we can promote safe and mentally healthy online engagement. So the concerns we have are understandable, given that there is an increase in media and policy debate on this topic. And there is a lack of evidence, evidence-based research on strategies available to date on whether digital technologies, including social media, cause mental health problems in children and young people. There is, which I'll be reaching out to today, some research available globally that shows the association exists between the type and frequency of online use and a state of well-being. Many of the impacts are interrelated, so discussion around each of these must be integrated. So everything you see on your screen at the moment, I'm going to pack in a little bit more detail. We know that online usage can exacerbate feelings of anxiety. Research undertaken by the Australian Psychological Society in 2015 found that over half of Australian teenagers connected to social media 15 minutes before bed every night, and almost 2 in 5 connected within 15 minutes of waking up. I guess I ask our audience as well to think about the statistics and research that I'm showing you for our children and young people and how that might actually resonate in your own personal lives too. More than 1 in 2 teenagers found it difficult to sleep or relax after spending time on social networking sites, and 60% felt brain burnout from constantly connected to social media. And young people, as Greg had mentioned, express their fear of missing out, fear that other people are having more fun than them or experiencing different things to them, and stated the importance of keeping connected within their social networks online. So making sure they weren't missing out on what their peers or actually what activity they were being engaged in. The frequency of use was also shown to contribute to feelings of connectedness and self-worth. When we're thinking about the links between technology and depression, The Lancet recently published a UK study about social media use and mental health in adolescents. These findings showed that greater social media use related to online harassment, poor sleep, low self-esteem, and poor body image, which in turn related to higher depressive symptoms. And again, as we're talking through, remember there is a lack of evidence-based research on all that we're talking about. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind that the online world is an extension of that offline world and what those protective and risk factors are for that child or young person. Sleep has also been really closely shown to link to mental health outcomes, and social media use has been associated with experiences of short sleep hours, the time it takes to fall asleep, and sleep disruption. I definitely know that for myself when I have my phone near me at night time, and this is true for our children and young people. Many young people sleep in close proximity to their phones, and so screen exposure before bedtime also impacts their melatonin production and the circadian rhythm. Therefore, it's altering that body's natural sleep mechanism. Spending a long time on social media might also lead to reduced sleep duration, which, if a child has a phone next to them and has incoming alerts turned on at night, also with that fear of missing out of new content, that could also cause sleep disruptions. Sleep quality and quantity could also be affected by levels of anxiety or worry resulting from experiences of online harassment and bullying. We also know that mass media has been a problematic area for a long time, and this really impacts a person's sense of self and perception about their body. Media, including social media, often highlights lifestyles and beauty that at times is unattainable to the everyday person. Many young people see images of bodies that don't actually exist in the real world, thanks to photoshopping and filtering, and the era of influencers also continues to impact body image, eating patterns, and self-esteem. When young people spend longer periods of time on social media platforms or engaging with more appearance-related content, so images, on social media, their mental health can be impacted. Appearance comparison can also play a critical role in the relationship between social media and body image. And with young people holding that fear of missing out, they are connected to both the positive body image messaging available to them, but as well the messages that are detrimental, which can result in higher levels of anxiety and that feeling of inadequacy. As we continue to explore research further and across BU, we will continue to bring our educators more information about each of these impacts. So it's really important to remember, as we've highlighted already, it's not all bad. And on the flip side, the digital environment can be a great equaliser for children living with those vulnerabilities or additional needs, as Greg has highlighted, as it can have a destigmatising effect for young people who might otherwise feel or be left out. Technology can support independence and freedom, especially when a young person feels they may not be able to experience that in their offline reality. In addressing these needs, e-safety research has found that digital and online technology can be of enormous benefit. This can be in the form of social engagement, which is particularly important for young people who have limited opportunities to socialise outside their immediate family circle. For example, they may have be limited by physical disability or have difficulties in communication or social anxieties, or have highly protective family members. So being online actually allows them and enables them to have that social engagement that they may be missing out on. Technology can also help break down barriers that may be faced in the physical world, enabling communication and socialisation with their peers, combating isolation, and provide opportunities to join communities of interest, play games, and access device and support. Greg had mentioned gaming briefly, and gaming is one of those examples that I think receives a lot of negative attention. And again, with working with families and students, this has always been a point of contention with discussions, not only between the school and the family, but in the family home too. Gaming can definitely have a contributing factor to negatively impact mental health, but we also need to challenge some of our thinking and reflect on the benefits. So if you have a student, a child or young person that you've been working with or know of that games a lot, I'd really invite you to think about and share your comments through our questions box. What's in it for that young person? Why do you think they are gaming? What do they get out of it? Might they feel a sense of achievement or accomplishment? Might they feel a sense of purpose or a challenge and be able to work through problem solving? Does it help build their persistence and their resilience by leveling up each time through gaming? And does gaming provide them with that sense of community and connectedness through an online gaming community? I guess don't forget this next time when you're talking with a concerned family or a child or young person, as there's often those positive aspects, along with those negative connotations with gaming. Digital online technology can also support young people to break free from low expectations. So an example of this, a young person who might struggle to read or write may experience success online. They might be able to develop skill in coding or learn about online hacks that create that optimal experience for them or others online. And they may be able to support others with technical solutions, which gives them a sense of purpose and accomplishment, and just that satisfaction of being able to be successful within that environment. Finally, an important benefit also includes what the online world allows for access to help-seeking information and support avenues. Avenues that we know and that I've used with students too, eHeadspace, Kids Helpline, eSafety of course, Youth Beyond Blue, Reach Out. There are so many out there and different applications that can be accessed without any charge, all provide pathways to find out information about protecting mental health, as well as provide support when responding to mental health needs. So there are many moderated online chat spaces, and these can provide a safe and confidential place to talk through concerns for a child or young person with a trusted and experienced mental health professional, and confidentially, which is really important. So we've started a bit of a conversation about some of the negative and positive experiences. I just wanted to unpack, before I hand over to Greg again, some of the signs an educator, a family member may notice when a young person may be experiencing an online issue. So we know that some people don't report when they are experiencing an issue, but these are some of the indicators that a young person could be seen to have that shows a heavy impact by social media issue or cyberbullying. Some of these include becoming secretive about their online experiences or changing their online usage habits. They may also withhold some information or delete certain accounts. They may be thinking about talking about social media in a different way that they used to, or you notice that with their peers in conversation. They might be avoiding people, places, or activities. This can be a sign that they don't want to be faced with a person or group that may have bullied them online or behaved online in a way that made them feel uncomfortable or upset. They might demonstrate a bit of a change in their personality, becoming a bit more withdrawn or anxious or sad or angry. This might be an instant change you notice or a change that occurs over time. It may be noticed directly when a young person receives a text or is actually online at that point in time. And an online experience, these all shape a young person's perception of what relationships look like, what's healthy, what's positive, what's unhealthy, what's a negative relationship. So you might see that change in how they interact with their peers, with their families, or as you with yourself as educators. They might make unexpected decisions about friendship groups. Again, there might be a friendship fallout that you notice or that they come and speak to you about. There may be a decline in school engagement or achievements. This might be from heavy online use. They're feeling tired, they're lacking energy, or it might be about the experience they've had online. And there may be a decline in their mental and or physical health indicators. So their connectedness to peers again, their confidence and self-worth, their resilience, their coping abilities, and a big one, those energy levels too. So these might not all be signs that are visible to an educator, but it is important to consider the possible link between these behaviours and interactions and online experiences. This information is also valuable to think about if concerns are raised by family members that you're working with. So before I do pass over to Greg, I just want you to take a moment from what I've presented and what Greg's presented so far, but especially with these signs. Do these indicators resonate with you? Have you had an experience that you can share with us? Have you observed some of these signs with your students? And what other indicators have you noticed? So this is not an exhaustive list, but they're, I guess, food for thought when you're thinking about what to notice and what that actually means and what those behaviours actually relate to. Please, again, add your comments to the question box. And if you do have specific questions, please also send them through to us. So moving on to our next slide, this is really looking at what prevention strategies can be implemented and how we can provide early support. So Greg, back over to you.
Thank you, Nat. And I think it is important to recognise how important technology is for vulnerable youth. It really is part of their life, but it's also important that many of these young people don't pick up the clues of the risks that they're exposed to online. It's also important to realise that while technology often facilitates the abuse for young people, the reality is it's the behaviour behind the technology that's causing the issue, not the technology itself. And I think that's a critical thing that we need to think about. We can certainly develop protection for children to deal in these particular spaces, and I think many of you have heard the story, it takes a village to raise a child. To build the resilience of most vulnerable children, we need to create layers of protection around them. We need to work with young children, particularly at the individual child, teaching them how to develop coping skills, to develop resilience. Self-regulation is an important one, self-confidence. And I think one of the things that eSafety has really focused on lately is building what we call the 4 R's of technology, that every young person should have a good understanding, be able to put in place these 4 R's, which are respect, respecting what you do online, respecting others, resilience, how you deal with issues online, your responsibility to help your friends, responsibility to be a bystander, and your responsibility to put good content online. And the last one is reasoning, critical thinking skills, or managing what you do online. The second layer is really around the child's environment, the family, the extended family, the relatives, the parents. And I think one critical part in here is how parents have conversations and giving parents the skills. We have to have the right conversations and the right questions. Their community is also another layer where we have peers, we have our education settings in schools and our teachers, our support staff, providing opportunity for children to participate in what sometimes we would call healthy risk-taking activities. And of course, the broader society, we need to be sure that public policies, legislation, of course, eSafety and social media companies all have a responsibility ensuring that children are safe online. Educators are ideally placed to really work in this particular space, and I think that's important for you to work right across the board. I mean, as educators, we can teach young people about safe and safe spaces and unsafe spaces online, perhaps about online safety programs which are structured, but also just embedding key messages into these spaces. We can help direct young children to safe online spaces, find a place where they can manage, they can feel safe, and they can thrive in these areas and be safe from outside intrusion. We can assist learners through a co-creation activity to define what we call do not share reminder lists. For these young people, sometimes they just need a structure in place to assist them, and things like what to do and why we need to do those. We can look at problem-solving skills and decision-making to enable children and young people to make informed choices about what they do online and what they don't do online. And I would suggest that using case studies, look what's in the media, have a look at other students' experience to be able to deliver that. And we can empower children and young people to use their voice. And for me, it is to trust their gut feeling. If it doesn't feel right, there's something wrong. I think it's important we provide support without judgment, and particularly when there are issues being experienced online. I think about young people who've shared a photo with someone else and they've given consent, and all of a sudden that trust has been broken. Is it the person that shared the photo that is the issue, or is it the person who's broken that trust? I think there's so much that we can empower young people with when it comes to information. I think we need to know the facts about how we actually work with these young people and understand that common internet safety programs that are delivered in schools work extremely well for most children, but not necessary for vulnerable children. We need to understand these learners and the context of where the school places their learning and how we actually deliver programs that are perhaps tailored or provide additional support for these vulnerable groups. We need to have online safety messages that are consistent and they're developmentally and culturally appropriate for kids. Certainly when we look at the sensitivity of young people online and the fact that often we're judgmental about the behaviours that they think are important in their life. And we need to focus on the needs of individual or groups when deciding how and what to deliver. Think about bystanders and how we can help others to seek support and how bystanders can make a significant difference in helping those young people. Developing strategies for us are very, very important, that we can actually develop these and put into what we call whole learning communities. We've developed lots of resources sitting on the eSafety website, and they are all developed coming from our research, both primary and secondary, and they're trusted and reputable sources where we find that information. We've mapped them out to the national curriculum, including our parenting resources, kids entry points, and our youth portal. Understanding school ICT policies and considering what they look like is important, but even more important is understanding the procedures. What do you do in an education setting when someone has a mobile phone when they're not supposed to? We need to identify and assess risk areas and informally and formally through research, ask students, hear the student voice in our school. But more important, it is to identify what, how, where and when these things are happening. We need to understand that students' prior knowledge has an impact on everyone, and perhaps many will be more expert in the online space than others, and we need to understand that they're all at different levels. And we need to explicitly teach online safety and provide individual support to those who are more vulnerable. We need to align that with our school mission statements, the national curriculum embedded in the curriculum as one, and ensure that we have support for every vulnerable child in schools. When we look at some of the things that we can really develop, I think employing a variety of communication methods is very important. And maybe perhaps brainstorming with young people, using scenarios to unpack the issues online and how they can occur. We need to think about embedding the online safety messages every time we use technology and ensure there's a common approach and it's accepted by all staff in your school. We need to develop and distribute a resource library that is accessible for everyone. Look at how we can build this into our intranet and our learning management systems. We need to work on these resources in our curriculum planning days and identify resources perhaps even in different languages for those children in multicultural families. We need to ensure learning and resources are available to all learners, especially the more vulnerable, so that they understand how to find those, where to find them. We know that at least 50% of young people who have issues online search for support online rather than go to the school or to a known body. So our strategies working here become more and more important. How do we put these in place? Each child will have a unique circumstance and they may have different vulnerabilities. There are no two children the same. It may be their age, it may be their upbringing, it may be the type of bullying they're being subjected to. It may be previous maltreatment and the emotional maturity levels or the resilience of children in these particular spaces. With that in mind, I want to share a case study with you and think about how we might manage with a young person who, in their particular case, has to deal with some of the issues in the online space. Tara is a 13-year-old student in your class and she's recently rejoined Instagram. And her main thing is to keep in contact with her friends, both outside of school time and at home time. Tara's received a direct message on Instagram from an unknown person. She's chosen to ignore the initial message, but receives follow-ups. The unknown person has stated that they're a friend, but then what is a friend and what's not a friend? And Tara's unsure and feels uncomfortable. Is this really a friend or is not? But then she comes and asks the teacher, what should I do? I think when you look at case studies like this, it's not a matter of, if a child will be contacted by a stranger, but when a young person comes in contact. It's a matter of supporting students about their awareness and skills in managing the contact. Youth with disability are far less likely to disclose personal, fake or general information about themselves. And I think when we work with young people, it is about our ability to assist them, because you may be the askable person that they go to. When we talk about askable person, it is the person that perhaps can be the key in putting assistance in place. If we look at some of the strategies that you would need to put in place in this particular case study, perhaps support Tara to build for her to build some of the features into her app, maybe putting better privacy settings in, maybe teaching her how to block, maybe teaching her about passwords and adhering to a password practice that's best practice. Discuss what consent means in the online space and how to filter and interrogate online messages that are appropriate and inappropriate, maybe to highlight reporting avenues, and again, inform her about the issues and her family, so that support structure in the next layer is sitting there in that particular space. So with that, I'd like to do a bit of a poll and have a look at some of the issues that we talk in these particular spaces, particularly around talking to strangers online in the case of Tara. Our poll today is: what percentage of children 8 to 17 do you think have used the internet to chat to someone they didn't know? So in this particular case, we are looking at around grade 3 through to year 12. When we are talking about the issues online, I think when we have to consider that children are contacted, how many of these young people take the opportunity to continue to have that message? What we do know from our research is that when talking to a stranger, the stranger can often be known to have a fake profile. And certainly in those particular cases, we found that 14% of all reports to the E-Safety Commissioner involve fake accounts. Illegal accounts, image-based abuse, cyberbullying, but fake accounts was one of the big ones. I can see there from our results today that you've certainly come through with our results, and 52% of children is the most popular answer in this particular space. What we did find for us is the answer was actually 38% in the green. It was 50% for teenagers and 27% for primary children. So when that was averaged out, it came across to 38%. So thank you for sharing that. Probably that's a little bit of good news that is not as high as what we thought. Let's have a look at another case study and how we perhaps work in this particular space. This is Ryan. He's an 11-year-old student who has a speech impediment. His peers often laugh at him, and some of his classmates have bullied him on social media. He loves playing online games, and he only plays games that use a text box to communicate so that no one knows about his disability. Ryan has made many online friends and tries to foster these friendships by sending photos and details of himself. In conversation with you, he innocently discusses that one of his online friends has asked for photos of him at the beach and in the shower. He also mentions the cyberbullying of his classmates. This is, again, another challenge for us with young people in the digital space. We know that 1 in 2 children have played multiplayer games with people they didn't know, and young people often turn chat functions into bullies. But the challenge in here is that being anonymous is all part of the gaming community. If we look at strategies to put in place to help young people like Ryan, perhaps we could think about how we discuss privacy settings and online friendships. We have a look at how we actually put support structures in, including family and friends. We upskill the class, and not just him, but his peers around online behaviours, respectful relationships, recognising and celebrating differences. Perhaps we could discuss the role of the E-Safety Commissioner to remove serious cyberbullying from the internet and how we can support. And perhaps for Ryan, we would look at things like having an e-safety plan for follow-up. In fact, let me unpack that on our next slide. When we talk about an online safety plan, it may include a review of technology, having a look at how well they've set up, structured, and how they use their technology and their apps and their devices. We might look at some key information relating to the students' most used applications, and perhaps using some of the case studies that are about what sort of apps you're using and what some of the dangers may be in there. We might look at some of the online support and reporting avenues as mentioned before, Kids Helpline, eHeadspace, eSafety and others. We could have a look at some of the expectations about what is a safe online practice, and also come up with a support person to take an active role in developing that plan within the school. But certainly we know that many young people have been bullied in gaming sites. Let's put up another poll and see what your understanding is of the gaming world. Again, we did research into online gaming, and we looked at young people aged 8 to 17. How many children do you think have been bullied or abused in the last 12 months when it came to online gaming? We're talking about games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Apex Legends, or Overwatch. Was it 17, 25, 54, or 71%? Well, I'm quite surprised at the figures we've got through there, and I'm going to tell you there is some good news. The answer in this particular one is 17% of children had been cyberbullied in the last 12 months in gaming sites. However, while that percentage might seem low, that figure is actually 200,000 children. So that's certainly in what we have seen some issues in that particular space. So let's look at one more case study before we start to do our wrap up. This one is again a story about a young girl, and her name is Arjan. Arjan is 15 and she's moved to Australia 3 years ago from India. She struggled to make friends at school and uses social media to fill the void. She has a number of boys who admire her, and she sent several intimate images. Just wait till our screen pops over and you'll be able to read this as well. She now regrets doing this by sending pictures, and she's highly stressed as they are threatening to share these images with her parents and schools unless she sends more. Due to her cultural background and conservative family, Arjun is too scared to tell them and is fearful her parents will disown her. She has no support structures outside her immediate family in Australia. We have seen many cases like this where young people have got caught up and perhaps been convinced to send photos to someone that they trust, and then those images have been non-consensually shared. So looking in the structures that we can put in place here and the strategies, we can firstly really work around the supporting the young girl and talking to her about how brave and what a big step it is to actually talk about the fact that that image has been posted and shared online. We can develop an action plan for and discuss how best to involve her family. The eSafety Commissioner under our image-based abuse platform can assist in the removal of that content from the internet. We can arrange support and counselling services. We can educate others in the learning community about respectful relationships and practices. In these cases, we may engage the local police or youth liaison police officer to support further education and to discuss the relevant online laws. We could engage supportive peers and family to focus on her experience. And this is very important to make sure we do this without blame and shame, and provide steps for her and her parents to report to the eSafety website if they're unsure how to put that in place. With being contacted by people online and sharing photos, we have seen a considerable number of these cases happening. Let's throw up another poll for us. This is again coming from the eSafety research. What ratio of young people have had some experience with sexting? So I'll be interested to see your thoughts in this one. What experience of young people 14 to 7? So this is grade 8 through to year 12, or year 8 to year 12. What percentage do you think has had some experience with sexting? 1 in 20, 1 in 10, 1 in 5, or 1 in 3? So our figures coming back, 1 in 20, 1 in 10, and 1 in 5, the two high ones, and 1 in 3 is the lowest, or almost not quite, the second lowest. The answer here is 1 in 3. This is not involved in doing sexting or sending them, but this is involved in either sending, being asked, so they may not have done it, but just asked to be involved in sending one, have received one without consent, have received one without asking at all, or someone has just come across and shown them an image of someone else. So that figure is 1 in 3. Girls are more likely than boys to be asked to send a nude image. 22% of girls were asked to send one, 8% of boys were asked to send one, and of those people who sent an image, 19% said they did so because they completely trusted the person who was involved. So with that, I think that gives you a bit of an overview of how we can provide steps and things to put in place. I'm going to pass back to Nat, and perhaps we can have a bit of a chat about question time and unpack some of the things that are happening in this particular space.
Right, thank you, Greg, and thank you everyone who has contributed to our questions today. Greg, I am going to ask you a couple of questions, and I think we've got probably about 5 minutes to spend on this Q&A section. So one of the questions that came through, which is definitely a question I have had from families too, how much time online is normal and appropriate?
I've heard that question many times myself. I guess there's so many different factors when it comes to the child that's online. It's again the maturity. It depends on where the child fits in the family. If you've got your first child and they're 12, you can generally hold off that technology till they're 12 years of age. But if you've got 3 other children, one who's 7 and one who's 3, they've got access to the 12-year-old's technology at the same time. So every child is a bit different. Generally, what we've been saying is there's some key things in here around what they're doing online, where they're doing online, who they're talking to. So again, you may have a child that spends 2 hours a night online and say that's a lot of time, but if it's 2 hours of homework, it's probably good that they're actually doing their homework. Maybe it's longer than what you like, but you may have a child who only spends 5 minutes online, and all of a sudden you're seeing aggressive behaviours and hostility because they're not happy with watching a game. One of the key things for us now is not necessary time, it's when the technology impacts on the behaviour or the well-being of the child.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any advice, I guess, to add to that question about how families can have those conversations with children and young people? I think many families I've spoken to find it uncomfortable or difficult to have the conversation, and there might be resources through eSafety, or that you can recommend how to have that conversation about, the length of screen time.
Yeah, we certainly do have some parenting advice on that, how to put things in place and have those conversations. I think one of the traps that parents sometimes get into is we tend to focus too much on the negativity, and we don't recognise the positive parts of the internet. So as you mentioned with the gaming example before, yes, you're being cyberbullied, you're struggling to be in that particular space because of the abuse that's happening. But we have to remember too, that's where all your mates are, and that's where you like hanging out. So that becomes a challenge. And I think parents, when they have the conversation about dangers online, changing practices, you've got to acknowledge to children that there are some positives to that space to get the conversation happening. Certainly why we're developing our program for 1 to 5 year olds is the amount of children with technology and spending a large amount of time early on is concerning. But I think you've got to get the practices in as early as possible in there. And I'm a great believer in timers. I think some type of digital clock that's right in front of you. You can see the time. You can look at the content. I think that management, and also explaining to children why we're putting in management structures, I think that's an important part as well.
Yeah, definitely. And something I know that I've spoken to families about is having, I guess, a technology box at the end of the night as well, that everyone puts their phones and laptops away at a certain time, and that it's, screen-free time for that period as well. And I guess it's, as you're saying, setting up some of those practices and those boundaries early on, so everyone, gets used to that too. So thank you for sharing that. We also have another question. Is there a specific curriculum that educators can use in their classrooms to teach some of these online safety skills that you've been speaking about?
Yes, the eSafety website has a section just dedicated to educators, and has been mapped out to the national curriculum. We have a variety of resources in there, particularly middle years of primary right through to our upper high school, with video content that's in there. And these are real live case studies, reenactments of children in Australia with issues they've had around cyberbullying, image-based abuse, excessive use of technology. All those come with resources for teachers to use. And then in the early years, we've got a lot of animated content, which also has lesson plans and content. And I'm pleased to say that in the near future, we'll be rolling out some resources with guidelines for schools, how they can implement their eSafety programs in much more detail. And we're trying to do a lot of the legwork for you. It'll all be there. You can grab this new resource. Hasn't been named. We haven't come up with a name yet, but it's not far off being finished. And we'll make that available for schools to think about how they manage their technology in the education system.
Look, and I know that will be so helpful. We know educators are time poor. There's lots of competing priorities, but with so many schools having laptop programs and being on the, in the digital world for learning too, these policies and what you're talking about and support and how to teach safety online is going to be so incredibly important and useful for our educators. We've probably got time for one more question. One question that's come through, and I'll just read this out for you, Greg. Is there any research or evidence underway about the impact of seeing a peer's explicit or nude, photo on the mental health or well-being or their engagement in school? Do you know of any research in that area?
What I do know is that we've just published some research about how parents have dealt with the fact that their child's seen pornography. And I guess that's probably the only bit that I can think of directly. But what I did have a look at is, did parents expect their child to see pornography? What type of pornography they saw? Did they have a conversation? How did they have a conversation? What are the strategies they put in place to deal with it? And this, from that, we also developed some resources on how to have a conversation with a child, and we built that into 3 frameworks, and we built how to have a conversation with a child under 8 years of age that's seen pornography. So this is very early on. We built resources around how to have a conversation with a 8 to 12-year-old and how to have a conversation with a teenager. So that's probably a fair bit of research sitting on our website about the parents' reaction. But as far as the mental health and well-being, I do believe there are a few people starting to work in this particular area, and we'll probably see more in that particular space coming soon.
Yeah, great. And we know pornography, it is a significant issue, and that it impacts so many of our children and young people in terms of their expectations on what a healthy, normal relationship looks like and a healthy sexual relationship. So that research that's been undertaken is really critical. So I'd invite everyone to check out the eSafety resources, and we're going to unpack a little bit of that as we move on. So thank you so much for that, Greg. I am going to move on from the Q&A section now. Any questions that haven't been responded to, we will have some post-webinar material that we'll be able to add to that, and that we'll be asking Greg to support with developing that too, to make sure that we give you the best advice for any of those questions. So as we wrap up, again, some of that further learning, Greg has mentioned that from the eSafety Commissioner, what is actually available. We probably won't have time to actually unpack each of those, but again, there will be available through the recording so that you can access these again, but would really encourage you to check out the eSafety website. For BU specifically too, we're talking about the importance of building resilience in our children and young people. So our learning resilience domain and early support domain provides really great professional learning for educators from early learning primary and secondary about how you actually build those skills and support, notice, inquire and provide that support when there is an issue that may arise. So as we are finishing up, just a recap on what we've actually looked at today. So we've looked at those factors that may increase a student's vulnerability to online harm and how these intersect. We've looked at the impacts that online harm can have on a student's mental health and when to provide early support. We've also looked at the benefits of being online. So even when a student vulnerability is present, what are the benefits and what are the positive aspects of an online world for a child or young person? And we've looked at some of those universal and targeted strategies to support students' diverse online safety needs. And it was really great to unpack those case studies that you presented, Greg. So thank you so much for that. So the next steps, I guess, from a BU perspective, we really encourage everyone that's attending today to make sure that you have registered as an individual user, but also to see if your learning community, your early learning service or school has registered as a whole BU community too, to make sure that you're up to date with our resources and our event offerings as well, so that you can be in touch and check out the resources we've got and the links we make with great organisations like eSafety Commissioner. We also would like you to consider the benefits of the online world. As we've said, when you're having those conversations, we often go to a deficit, approach with technology, and to try and flip that around and think of what are the benefits for the child or young person at that point in time, and also to reflect on the policies, the practices and the curriculum that's currently in place. We have some great BU implementation tools that allow you to do a bit of a pulse check in your learning community about what's working and what are those areas for continuous improvement. So all fantastic avenues. And also we encourage you to check out the eSafety resources that we have spoken about too. So we're about 2 minutes off finish time, which allows me enough time to say a big thank you for joining us today. This is a really important topic to discuss about online safety, and we really thank you all for your contributions. A big thank you to Greg too for your time, for your planning around this, and for all your talking today. It's been really insightful, and I know that if anyone's joining us via the recording, you're going to really enjoy this webinar. So thank you so much, Greg, for all your time here. I wanted to say a big thank you to the team behind the scenes as well to make sure this webinar has run smoothly today. So thank you, everybody. When you do exit out of this webinar, you're going to be prompted with a short 5-question survey. This really helps us to know what you've liked, what we can improve on, as well as any other topics you're interested in for future webinars. So please be honest with your responses. We really love to hear from you, and we want to make sure BU continually meets your needs. As another reminder, you will receive a certificate of attendance today. That will be made available to you within about 2 weeks. So look out for that in your email. And the link to the recording will also be provided, but that will be on the BU website on the events page in the next fortnight also. Thank you again. We hope to see you next time as you join us. We have 2 other webinars coming up this year too, so please take a look at our events page for that and run again in collaboration with Early Childhood Australia and Headspace. But until then, please take care of yourself. Thank you for listening, and let's continue to work together to grow a mentally healthy generation. Bye everyone for now. Thank you so much for joining.